Welcome, and thank you for joining us. My name is Ilir Miteza, and I'm a professor of economics at the College of Arts, Sciences, and Letters here at University of Michigan, Dearborn. I am excited to be here today. We're going to welcome U of M Dearborn alumnus, Alan Atee, for today's Alumni Engagement Speaker Series. In particular, I am delighted that we're going to hear from Alan on his experience as a leader and entrepreneur in the food service industry, but also his time as a student majoring in economics at U of M Dearborn. Before we dive into the conversation, I'd like to share a little about Alan's career and achievements, and this is quite a list. Although his LinkedIn title states greatest sandwich maker of all time, his actual and formal title is co-owner and chief executive officer of Picasso Restaurant Group, a food service management company based in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Alan started in the restaurant business over 30 years ago, working alongside his parents and brother and the family's first deli. In 2009, after 8 successful years operating a second deli in Novi, Michigan, Alan began exploring the food service management business. With the knowledge from his degree and the hands-on experience from the restaurants, Alan was able to secure its first food service contract with the Domino's Farms Office Park, a large office park, I should say. Currently, Picasso has over 200 employees and operates 24 eateries across Southeast Michigan, including our very own U of M Dearborn. Alan and the Picasso team are the on-campus food service provider for all of U of M Dearborn, including special events, catering, and the McKinley Cafe, where we see them daily. Alan oversees much of the business, including strategic planning, company growth and development, finance, and day-to-day operations. He leads Picasso's effort in becoming an industry leader, sustainability, and local purchasing with a focus on company culture. And it shows. Last but not least, Alan is an active member of the community, a foundation board member with the Farmington and Farmington Hills Foundation for Youth and Families, and an annual mentor of students from the Dearborn Area Young Entrepreneurs Academy. He also spearheaded efforts to become one of only three restaurants in all of Dearborn, Michigan, to earn gold status in Beaumont Hospital's Healthy Dearborn Initiative, which promotes healthy food options, sustainable efforts, and betterment of the local community. We are truly honored to welcome Alan today and to have him oversee this important aspect at U of M Dearborn, which is keeping our students, faculty, staff, and guests well fed. Please join me in welcoming Alan Atee.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Professor. That was quite an introduction.
Well, indeed, your list of achievements is long and impressive.
Oh, thank you. I actually found the funniest part to be the LinkedIn comment. I have really no social media. I never got into that world, and my vice president of operations told me, you got to get a LinkedIn, you know, you're the CEO of the company. And so
I thought that was an amazing title, and you are a great sandwich maker.
Thank you.
I can vouch for it. Again, thank you for joining us, Alan. Real pleasure to be here with you today. And why don't we start with your background, your story, and how you got here?
Sure. I'd love to share that. I'll just digress to my LinkedIn there. What I didn't know when I changed my title to that is that it shoots an announcement out to all of my connections congratulate Alan on his new title. I had no idea that that did that. So then I started getting all these phone calls about my new position. So I got quite a laugh out of that when I actually did that. But
in other words, a brilliant social media strategy.
Brilliant, yeah.
It worked.
Intentional too, as I tell my family. So, you know, a little bit about my background and my story. It's certainly my favorite story to tell. It's a story of hard work and family and what I would consider to be the American dream. My grandparents, they immigrated to this country from Lebanon and settled in Dearborn, Michigan. To work for the Ford Motor Company. So they worked for $5 a day, and both my grandparents worked in the foundry. So that was literally shoveling coal into a hot furnace. And my parents would often tell me stories of them coming home covered in soot. And we certainly come from very humble beginnings. And I think if I look at the journey of my entire family, I think that's where the foundation for hard work really began. My father was the first member of our family to go to university and graduate. He graduated from GMI and later became an executive for Cadillac Motor Car for about 35 years. My mom began her career as a hairdresser at Hudson's in downtown Detroit before venturing off on her own and opening several successful salons. And when Cadillac Motor Car shut down their plant in Detroit and my father had to drive about an hour to his new position, he took an early out with General Motors. My mom had recently sold the salons, and they bought a 500 square foot candy shop here in the Domino's Farm Office Park in Ann Arbor. They converted that into a deli, and my brother and I have had the pleasure of working alongside them since we were about 6 and 8 years old. We used to push a snack cart every summer around this building. And we rang the little bell and we sold candy bars and pop and stocked coolers and, you know, eventually made it up to register and then maybe making sandwiches after that. And so we've worked alongside them for our whole lives. In 2000, after college, we opened up our first street side venue in Novi, Michigan called Picasso Deli. And my brother and I each worked a deli for about 10 years, saving our pennies and until our next opportunity. And that came in the form of a food service contract. The main cafeteria, which was run by a global giant, was up for bid. And originally we were not invited to bid on that project. But one of our good patrons actually started a petition in the building and received a bunch of signatures. They took it to property management and said, you know, you have this great family doing such a good job at this little deli. How come they're not running our big cafeteria? And so we got
nice.
Yeah, we got invited to bid on the RFP. It was my first process. I grossly overbid on the project, not knowing, you know, exactly how to do that, which I think was part of the reason they gave it to me. But within the first year, we took sales from about 400,000 to close to $1 million. And Michigan is a very large tenant here in this building, and they started noticing the difference in the food service providers and said, how come you're not doing anything with the university? And my father said, we would love to. Can you connect me? And the next year we bid on our first U of M project. We did the same thing with that venue, turned it in from a subsidized operation into a revenue generating operation for both the university and ourselves. And that stemmed into U of M Law School and several other Michigan contracts, which sent to different office buildings. And pre-pandemic, we were like you said, there are about 24 venues and employed over 200 people. And so it's a story of hard work and passion. And I just, for all the money in the world, I wouldn't change it. I think my mom sees how hard we work and certainly worries, but I wouldn't change it. You hear so many family stories of people in business together that are just horrific, but ours is the exact opposite. We've been constant companions. My dad is now 82 and my mom is getting up there. I won't divulge her age, but they still work hand in hand with us, and it's just been such a wonderful journey that I wouldn't trade it for anything.
It really is, and it shows. And I'd like to confess that I miss you guys now that I'm on campus only one day a week.
We miss you too.
Yes. So you do a terrific job, and I can see how well you treat your employees and how happy they are to work for your company.
Oh, thank you.
It's remarkable.
Yeah, we've created a very nice culture here.
Yes. Alan, you graduated from U of M Dearborn, an important reason why you're here.
Yes.
And with a wise choice, with a degree in economics, which is what we both have in common, I suppose. What was behind your interest in economics? I'm curious, and how did you come to choose it as a major?
I think like all young people, when you're that age, you might not know exactly what you want to do, but I think I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be an entrepreneur and be in business for myself. I think part of that had to do with working in my family business. I think my parents were, God bless them, they're very good teachers and mentors. And my dad knowing me well, and he having worked in a corporate setting for 35 years, he told me, always would explain to me pluses and minuses of both sides, but I think he recognized the work ethic that my brother and I had. And he thought, he certainly encouraged me to do whatever I like, but he thought I had what it took to be an entrepreneur. And I think there's this misconception that owning your own business is the easy road. And I would certainly beg to differ that it's probably the much more difficult road. It's certainly something that's you live, you breathe, you eat it 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And so when I started college, I think I knew I wanted to focus on what would help me in my business ventures. And I looked at things like marketing and finance and things that would certainly help. But I felt it important to understand the big picture. How does it all work, from production to consumption and ultimately wealth? I think at a young age too, you look at wealth as a specific thing, certainly much more money driven. And as you get older, you realize that equation is much more complicated. And now if I
agree.
What I consider wealth, the money part is actually quite far down the pecking order. I look at my family and being in good health and enjoying what I'm doing. And I think the money part just on the wealth chain has certainly moved down as I've aged. But I really felt like if I could understand how the whole system works, holistically, that I could take those lessons I learned and then apply them to whatever specific passion I had or direction I wanted to go. And ultimately, that was my deciding factor is I want to know how it all works, and then I'll figure it out from there. So that's why I chose economics.
Yes, and and speaking of that satisfaction you find in your work, it's not every day that the CEO of a large company such as yours finds himself in the front lines, behind the counter or behind the cash register, and where I see you often.
Yes, sir.
Which is remarkable. And what I notice is the way you work. It's always fast, usually multitasking, never failing to smile and to connect with the students, with the staff, with the faculty. And so I've always wanted to ask you, what is the secret to working with such a positive energy?
Yeah, that's a complicated question, but I think it really comes down to passion, and taking enjoyment in my profession. And for me, that really carries over into many aspects of my life, not just my work. I feel no matter how trivial or daunting or how hard a task is, I just try to do it with a positive attitude and do it to the very best of my ability. I get a great deal of self-satisfaction for having a task in front of me and then working hard at it and getting that final result is just very self-gratifying to me. And I do that really in whatever I do, from mowing the lawn to playing with my kids to making a sandwich. My wife sometimes certainly thinks it's a detriment and might even call it a perfectionist to some extent. And it might sound a little cliche, but I truly feel, we're on this earth for a relatively short period of time. And I just choose to go through life with a great deal of positivity. And, I look at my favorite part of my job, and certainly as my company has grown, my roles and responsibilities have changed a bit. You know, I have to spend time on the computer and meetings, but certainly what drives me the most is the personal connections I have with my patrons and with my employees. I love that part of the business, and so I very deliberately make time out of my schedule to work in restaurants, in the front of the house, in the back of the house, and I think it also goes a long way in my leadership style. I like to lead by example, and I think when employees see an owner of a somewhat large corporation back there washing dishes because that's what needs to be done, or making a sandwich because that's what needs to be done, I think it does a great deal for the culture of our company and the work ethic that I have and that I somewhat expect from my organization and the people in it. And that's what really drives me. When I was a young man, I have a quote up in my office by a gentleman named Chuck Palahniuk, and it says, the goal isn't to live forever, it's to create something that will. And I don't know why that quote stuck with me at a young age, but it did. And that's ultimately what I'm trying to do is create something that will outlast me, and whether that goes to future generations or become self-sustaining, you know, that's what I'm trying to do. And again,
that really is a great sort of personal philosophy of work. Thank you for sharing that with us. You were just talking about work in your restaurant, and we're recording this hopefully at the end tail of a pandemic.
Hopefully.
It's still with us, obviously, and the reason I mention is because one of the hardest hit industries has been that of restaurants and hospitality. And more recently, they've been struggling to recruit and retain employees. Some restaurants are changing their business models to reflect the new realities and also the new challenges, new and old challenges of their employees. What can you share with us about how you faced these challenges during the pandemic?
At some points, I curled up into a little ball and hid under my desk. I won't lie about that. And you're right. I think this pandemic in general, you know, it devastated a lot of industries. It's funny, some industries certainly thrived on it. The restaurant industry in general got hit really hard. And my specific sector of food service management got hit harder than even street side venues. I think if I look at street side venues, they had some pivot points, whether it was moving to carry out and stopping dine-in service, or using avenues like Grubhub and those type of things. So they were able to pivot a bit, and I think their time frame was condensed due to that. But my specific sector just got annihilated. You know, we do food service management for schools, hospitals, and office buildings, and schools were shut down for a year and a half. My hospitals had severe visitor restrictions, and they still do. And then my office buildings with remote work really went to really, really low population, some even zero, some we don't even have open yet. And so I looked at our company, and for a year and a half, we were doing about 3% of normal revenue. In September, when colleges opened back up, we got up to about 25% of normal revenue, but we're still down about 75% revenue in our field. And so we certainly had to make adjustments. Knock on wood, my parents ingrained in me saving money for a rainy day. I didn't think it would be a rainy 2 years that I would have to prepare for, but you know, I would consider us savers. Some might even call it frugal. Just I've always invested money back into my business. I've left it in my business. I don't live lavishly by any means. And that certainly proved essential in getting us through. But when I look at the industry in general moving forward, they call it the Great Resignation now. National Restaurant Association is estimating that about 45% of people that were in restaurants have moved on to different fields and really have no intention of coming back. And, you know, you look at more automated systems, whether it's self-ordering kiosks, or they even make a robot now that flips hamburgers for you, and really efficient systems. I think improving processes in the company is certainly going to be necessary to not only stay competitive, but really stay afloat or stay sustainable moving forward. But if I look at our success, I think so much was built on personal connections and interactive experiences. And so I think it's important for me as I move forward to not lose sight of those things, right? And again, it goes back to me to whatever part of the population is left, how do I create a culture and a belief system that makes people want to come work with me? And for me, that's really having a vision, having a heartfelt belief in that vision, being passionate and truthful when I'm explaining that vision to somebody that I want to get to join my team, getting them to believe in that vision, and then how do we achieve that vision so it's mutually beneficial to not only me and my organization, but to that individual. I always felt whether you were using your employment with us as a stepping stone or as a career, it was important to find out what my employees' goals were, right? And then explain to them what my goals were and how it can be mutually beneficial if we align those goals. If you're a student that's just using this job to pay for tuition, okay, how do we achieve that together? Or if you're a young father who wants to provide more for your family, how the growth of our company will ultimately lead to your growth if you do a good job. And so that's kind of how I always run. If I look at the people I've surrounded myself over the years with, it's people that I think have a good moral compass, or a compass like my own, family orientated, hardworking, integrity, honest, good attitude. Those for me are things I can never teach, right? I can teach anybody how to make a sandwich or how to do payroll or kind of those things, but I always try to surround myself with individuals of like mind and like beliefs. And that's really been a success story for us and how we've created a culture really like what I would consider no other in the industry. Pre-pandemic, we were so far below the national average of turnover. And I think it again stems to, I'd like to say my leadership, but ultimately I think it's the people that I've surrounded myself with and their leadership and their hard work.
Well, those are certainly beautiful principles and really productive approaches to work. It wasn't lost on me when you said people who want to work with me as opposed to for me. And that makes a lot of sense. I can see that on a daily basis with Picasso. You have touched upon some of these themes in your, but in your own professional development along the years. As a UM Dearborn graduate and a successful entrepreneur, what have you learned along the way that stood out for you and that you think might be useful to share both with our students and with our alumni who are just sort of getting started in their professional trajectory?
Yeah, maybe the hardest question of them all. You learn so many life lessons as you get older and you go through the years. And the older you get, I think you realize the less you know, right? When you look at kind of everything, I think the really wise men realize they know very little at all when you look at everything. I think for the young people who might be watching this, my number one advice would be listen to your parents. I think when you're young and your parents tell you things, you think, oh, they're old and they don't understand and they don't know how the world works. And as you get older, you realize, boy, every single thing they told me or advised me on.
By the way, I am making my daughter watch this video.
Oh, it's such an important lesson, and it's so unfortunate that you really don't realize that until you get maybe in your 30s or your 40s. And I never, as a young man, I wouldn't even run things by my parents. And as I've gotten older, now important decisions, I would never even think about not running and getting their input. And I think time teaches you just so many lessons. So for the young kids, you may think they are BSing you or whatever the term may be, but there is just a wealth of knowledge and advice. And most of the time they are looking out only for your best interest. So take heed to what they have to say, because it's very useful information. And I listened to a lot of it. I wish I would have absorbed even more of it. And for those that are past that stage, I would say, whatever you do in life, do it with purpose and do it with passion, whether that's, your family or the work you do, whatever it is, it's prioritizing what's important in your life and, making time for those things as well as your personal career and going through this wonderful journey, just surrounded by people and things that you love, right? Or else it's not worth it. And so those would be my little tidbits of advice for anyone.
I think that's a perfect note to close on, Alan. We could be spending hours here, but we're just about out of time. I would like to thank you again for being with us and for sharing your story.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you. It's truly a pleasure to be a part of the U of M Dearborn community as well. I will say it's an exceptional university. I truly felt I got a wonderful education there. Met a lot of wonderful people there. It's very diverse in so many ways, whether you look at the economic status or the diversity of the people there. It's just a wonderful place, and I feel very blessed to have been part of that community in my younger years, and now a part of it. I'll call them my middle years. It's just been an honor, and it's certainly been a pleasure speaking with you today as well.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you all for joining us, and go blue. Thank you, Alan.
Go blue.